Welcome to the Music is My Life podcast from Berkeley Online. I'm your host, Pat Healy. It's October, which means it's the perfect time to listen to contemplative indie folk music. And Jose Gonzalez fits that bill. So let his spoken voice in your ears warm any autumnal shivers that may occur. Jose is our guest this month, and if you're unfamiliar with him, he is a singer-songwriter from Sweden, though his family is originally from Argentina. His latest album is Local Valley, and for the first time in his recorded output, he is straying from the sound he is best known for. But there's a lot more to Jose than that sound he's known for. In fact, Jose started out in the hardcore scene. His fallback plan, if music didn't work out, was biochemistry, and he nearly completed his PhD. I'm very thankful that his love of music won out, and his love of music all began with his parents' cassettes of Argentinian folk music. We'll let Jose take it from here.
There's a cassette tape with a group from Argentina called Marcama, and that's Argentinian folklore. My parents had a record collection that was about a meter of LPs, and then some cassettes. And so that cassette tape with Marcama, that was one of the earliest memories. There's also some pictures of me sitting with huge headphones on, maybe when I was 3 or something, and that was probably listening to Beatles or Silvio Rodriguez or Mercedes Sosa. Not sure. Maybe yeah. The music I was hearing was mostly the music of my parents from Latin America. But then the first record that I bought was I bought it together with my brother, and it was basically a break dance record, Break Machine, with the song Street Dance. So I can't remember properly what went through our heads, but we dressed up with Adidas suits and did our breakdance moves at the kindergarten when we were 5 or 6. So I didn't play any instruments then. It wasn't until I was 13 when it took off in a way.
Yeah, so that was what, classical guitar? Was that the first thing, or what was the punk band first?
It was actually around the same summer, but I can start before that because it's very common in Sweden that kids get to choose an instrument pretty early on, and everyone gets to try out the flute, the recorder, when they're 7 or 8. I did that too. My mom had a Casio synth that I used to play and try out the different beats and bringing out the speed to maximum, and then there was a guitar at home. Apart from those instruments, it wasn't until 13 when it was basically all my friends and me that got into music. We during the breaks at school, we went to the music hall and jammed or tried to play songs together. And guitar was my main the instrument that I got hooked to first, but also bass, and so it was quite eclectic from the start. Learning to play the singer-songwriter styled songs of the Beatles, like Blackbird and Mother Nature's Son and Dear Prudence, but then also bass with my friends that were formed a punk band called Back Against the Wall, and that was more Misfits, Black Flag, even Gigi Allen. About a year later, I started to learn classical guitar, and that's when I wanted to learn more. Wanted to learn jazz guitar actually, but I went to this private teacher who my friends knew, so I went up to him and asked him, like, "Can you teach me jazz guitar?" And he said, "No, but I can teach you classical." so that's what I did for a couple of years. And the punk band, on the other hand, was a bit short-lived. We did a couple of demos, and then we formed with other friends. We formed Renaissance. That was the same drummer as in Junip.
Oh, wow. Okay, that's really interesting that you had been friends for so long with the folks from Junip. I think it's also interesting to think about how your sound would have evolved differently if he had taught you jazz guitar.
Yeah, it is interesting, and I'm sure it would have been completely different. Maybe I wouldn't have been successful in the music business. It's interesting to think about. Another switch was maybe me growing up in the suburb to Gothenburg until the age of 7, and then moving into the city. That could have also been a parallel universe.
So yeah, what kind of different things were you exposed to in the city once you moved there?
There were less friends from Latin America and more friends from different parts, and mostly Swedish friends. But my best friend was Elias Araya from Eritrea. He introduced me to Michael Jackson, to Bobby Brown, and then later a bit cooler music like indie rock, death metal, and hardcore. So he was like the record collector, and I was I was into many things, but I wasn't into collecting albums.
I still think it's interesting though, so that you were somehow exposed to Gigi Allen in the suburbs. How did that make its way?
Yeah, so okay, so Gigi Allen Misfit, that was when I was 13 in the city. So that was
Okay, all
interesting.
right. So you were in the city then. I was
Yeah,
gonna
yeah.
say.
So 7 was the switch from suburb to.
Okay.
But yeah, no, it was interesting. I mean, I wasn't a fan of Gigi Allen, but the singer, we were really good friends. We would skate together, and it was also a collector from early on. So he had all the Misfits, all the Black Flags, all the Dinosaur Jr. And we would just sit on his room and listen to music, and yeah, he got more and more extreme with the years. But that's another story.
Is he still performing at all?
No, no, no. He switched to coding and to hacking, so he was in jail for a while.
Oh, wow.
And so this I'm talking about two different persons. One is Elias Araya, the drummer from Junip,
Right,
who's
right.
super nice, and the other one is Thomas Malmgren, who was the singer of Back Against the Wall.
Right. So were the Back Against the Wall, those were the first performances you ever did, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I was trying to remember, and there's one show we did at a youth house near the school where there were rooms for so we could rehearse music, and we did a show. There were maybe 10, 15 people there, and I remember me playing. It was like, I mean, I mentioned all these cooler punk bands, but I was also into punk. So one of the songs was like funk, and my it started bleeding in my fingers, and as I mentioned, Thomas, he was banging his mic into his forehead. And there was one song that was a bit too fast for the drummer, so he's like midway in the song, he was just like, ah, fuck this. So he threw the sticks and tried to do a stage dive, but the stage was really low and no one really catched him. It was really chaotic, and yeah, not so cool actually.
I'd imagine every performance since was probably a little bit smoother.
Yeah, yeah, I think so. And yeah, from there on, we it was more playing with the hardcore band, and playing in Gothenburg and Vänersborg and the cities that are nearby. And later, I got invited to play electric guitar in two different bands. One was Unison, that was like emo rock, and the other one was Only If You Call Me Jonathan. And with both these bands, we were able to go on short tours, like 1 week around Sweden, but also around Europe. We both those bands released on a Czech label called Day After Records. So it was fun. But when we got back home, we everyone had to take out their wallets and pay for the gas. So it's on a hobby level.
So was your family supportive of you pursuing this, or were they hoping it was just a hobby or a phase?
Uh, I mean, so they were very supportive of me playing music, hanging out with my friends, having activities that weren't about robbing people. I didn't. I did my homework. I used to study a lot. I was slow at reading, but I did my homework. So when it was time to choose a career, so after primary school, I mean, when you choose if you go to university or to study music, I felt like it was almost like a 50-50 choice. But I think that's where my parents pointed me in the direction of something that could more easily pay the rent, which was yeah, going for university. And in my case, I was into biochemistry. I like chemistry was easy. I like math. So I went into molecular biology, and I think they were relieved, especially when they thought about my hardcore band that wasn't really making any progress.
So, speaking of making progress, you made a lot of progress in your studies and you got really close to your PhD, right?
Halfway, yeah. So I did. So this is yeah. After molecular biology, I took my master's after 4 years, and then I got into a research group that studied viruses. And yeah, that was my aim and goal to try to come up with something new for the world and publish it. I didn't have any spectacular results at all, so so halfway through, it was actually a relief to be approached by these two guys from Stockholm that wanted to release my music. They saw my 7 inch that I released a couple of years earlier in 2001. And so in 2003, I just left the PhD studies, and I got a break where I was able to go back if I wanted to. But yeah, once I released the first EP in May 2003, it was pretty obvious that I was going to be able to live from music for a while.
So, when you did that first release in 2001, that was under your own name for the first time, right?
Yeah, exactly. Before that, it was always different bands, and including Junip in 2000.
So, when you decided to, pursue music full time, you'd been working on your sound for a number of years.
Yeah, yeah. So the way I felt it was that I had been writing my own songs. I even performed at like a music contest where I came to Swedish finals or semifinals. One year with classical music and the other year with my own songs. So I had a style that seemed to work. People liked it, but it wasn't until I had these two songs, "Hints" and "Dead Weight on Velveteen," that were the ones I decided to release as 7 inch. I mean, I put the money, but it was through my friend's label, Cacophony. With those two songs, I felt like I had a change in style that I felt like, okay, this feels better. It feels cool. It feels yeah, compared to the old songs that were a bit more cheesy, a bit more whiny in my ears. And these two were a bit cooler, still introspective, but more about internal struggle and not from relationship point of view.
In the documentary, the extraordinary ordinary life of Jose Gonzalez, the filmmaker seems to pay a lot of attention to your struggle with creating material and
Yeah.
the pace at which you do that. Is that something that still frustrates you, or have you come to peace with it, or have you found a better way of getting the results faster, or how do you approach it now?
Now I found I have a bag of tricks, so I don't get stuck as I used to. I felt like with the first three albums and the first Junip album, that was having a writer's block was the standard, was the way that I was writing. Sorry, I could easily pick up the guitar and come up with riffs, come up with chord progressions, and even hum and have a half-finished song in half a day or a day. But the lyrics was the part where, especially the first and second album, I didn't feel like I wanted to say anything to the world. It was a necessary evil. I used to mention in all the interviews. So I had a song that was guitar and melody like finished, and I just needed to put words, and it was really, yeah, a struggle. But yeah, with the years I've found more things that I want to say, more tricks to find sentences and words that feel musical. So I learned from my previous relationships and also friends that are very musical, and they tell me how they work, and so nowadays I just I can have a working week where I put my sheet of paper and I just collect nouns, verbs, adjectives, and rhyming pairs, and then maybe a couple of metaphors to tie it up and try to have images in my mind, and that works. After a while, it's almost like doing what do you call it, hangman. Basically, know how many syllables you need, and you just like start filling in until it's a puzzle. So yeah, that and of course taking in the science of creativity, taking walks, sleeping on it, working on things during long periods of continuously day by day instead of trying to squeeze everything into a night.
Looking at Sweden and all the songwriters who have come out of Sweden, is there any sort of like national pride of like we're Swedish and songwriting is what we do?
Oh yeah. I think there's definitely a national pride, acknowledgement that we are together with Jamaica and Iceland, one of the small countries that has the most hits per capita in the international sphere. And of course, it's a tradition of pop music from ABBA and Roxette, and then later what I see as chameleon bands, basically bands that are imitating similar versions from the past or from the current. Swedish people are very sensitive to trends and they travel a lot, so they can go to New York, they can go to London and see what's hip, and they imitate and then make better versions. So Refused being a hardcore band that was inspired by bands from DC and using that inspiration to do one of the best hardcore records in history. Yeah, it's fun to think about and but I think it's good to point out that it's adopting the Anglo-Saxon culture and of course when I go to Spain, when I go to France, they have so much music, so many bands, and most of them sing in their own languages, and they don't make it abroad as much as the Swedish bands. So there's something about looking outwards that I think Sweden and Iceland and maybe not Jamaica, but yeah.
How many languages do you speak?
Three and a half.
Three and
So
a half.
Swedish, Spanish, Swedish, English, and some German.
Yeah, because your latest singles in Spanish, and
Yeah.
what was spoken around the house the most?
It was Spanish, and it still is. So with my parents, my brother and sister. But for me, Swedish is my main language. It's where I'm most fluent and I have most words. Well, actually, now I think English I might have more words than Swedish, only because I read and listen so much in English. And German, I studied for a while and learned a lot, but I'm not able to speak. So it's latent language.
So when you are writing lyrics from all of your material that I've heard, I mean, except for this most recent song, they're all in English, right?
Yeah.
I don't think I've heard you do any Swedish songs, right?
No. So it is the first time. I mean, except for some things I did when I was very young. It is the first time for both Swedish and Spanish, and kind of weird being 43 years old. And I tried it with my previous album back in 2015. Sort of got stuck and switched to English, and maybe I was a bit lazy. I didn't try hard enough, and finally I've come to terms with my more facets of myself.
I wonder like how when you have so much at your disposal, I mean, I guess it's like a painter, with so many different colors, but I just wonder how you choose like, okay, this is going to be the language I'm going to use to express this song.
The way I think is I just take out my demos and I think about what the song could be about, what mood is. Yeah, it's different from song to song. So with the El Invento, I had this chord progression and arpeggio that's very similar to Paul Simon, but also Silvio Rodriguez, and it felt right to try to do something poetic and like a little jewel. So Spanish felt right for that one. With Valle Local and Schume, I wanted to have use my native languages, just as many of my inspirations, many of the bands that I'm inspired by from Mali or Niger, sing in their own languages instead of French, for example. So that felt fun to do. Valle Local in Spanish and Schume in Swedish. including Swedish slang, Gothenburg slang.
What are the slang words?
Yeah, so Shumme is dude or guy, and yeah, the way I write it is very sort of talky. It's not as like El Invento is more like ambitious, more. I'm trying to be poetic. With Shumme, it's more like I'm just talking.
And so, not to jump ahead too much, but we are talking about El Invento, and that song was inspired by your daughter.
Yeah, I mean, it was the first song I released from the album. So the bio was a bit of a mix. She inspired me for many things on the album, and it's a bit like a overstatement. But of course, she prompted me to think more about who I am and what I'm doing in life, both who I am biologically and culturally. She was coming into existence, and my parents, they're still alive, but there's the limits of life, and reality knocks on the door, and I'm thinking about these topics, and so she prompted that sort of thinking in a way,
Hmm.
or accentuated that thinking. It's been one of my favorite topics for many years before her.
So having this new person as part of your lineage, did you find that you had many more things to say to the world?
Well, it was more a sense of urgency. Yeah, feeling like I want to change the world for the better. So the things that I'm frustrated with in the world is I wanted to make songs that speak to those frustrations. So El Invento is actually just the words are basically just asking questions and not pointing fingers too much. But I did choose the title El Invento, the invention, because it's when people and cultures ask these questions, they come up with made up answers, and which is in a way fine. But the more we know about the world, the less we need to invent. We can see reality for what it is, and also enjoy all the new questions that arise for every new answer. So that reveals my secular humanistic worldview. If I'm trying to promote something with this album, that's one of the things.
Yeah, I've read about that in recent years, and I think it was with the last album. One of the videos was, what is this, like? We are the godless church, or whatever they say at the beginning.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's that was Sunday Assembly.
Yes, yes. It's really exciting to me when an artist has something like that that they believe in and that they want to spread their views like that. How long has this been something in your, how long have you had this worldview?
Yeah, so it wasn't articulated in my mind when I was younger. I didn't think about these topics too much. When I was writing for my second album, the same that the documentary is about, I was struggling to find topics to write about, and that's when I sort of raised my head and looked out in the world, and okay, what are the interesting clashes, the interesting topics that I could write about. And it was around the time that Richard Dawkins released his book, The God Delusion. I read that, and before that, I've been reading Peter Singer, which is very clear thinker in terms of ethics and morality, without any mention of deities or gods. So, but yeah, so around the second album, that's when I decided, okay, I'm gonna try to write something about this, and I wrote a song called Abraham, which was basically making fun of the Abrahamic religions, seeing them as some sort of zombie that's sleepwalking and not being able to update itself. And yeah, in a jokey kind of way, that became one of my things that I've been coming back to in my solo work and with Junip. With Junip, we did a song called Howl, which is also a bit sciencey. But yeah, I guess this album is the one where I'm taking it to the next level in many ways. With a song like El Invento, with a song like Visions, and then Head On and Schume, where I'm revealing even more how I'm thinking, or what I want to promote, or how I would like people to ask questions when they think about these topics.
Right. I think When you are a traveling artist and you do have a philosophy that you're espousing through your lyrics, you must get involved in so many more conversations about this sort of stuff because you're putting it out there.
Yes and no. I was a bit surprised that there wasn't that many people that noticed it. I think
Hmm.
that I was singing about these topics, and to be honest, it's not all the songs. So it's a bit hidden in metaphors and many songs, and Abram wasn't really a hit. So I mean, I didn't aim it to be a hit, but yeah, it got under the radar. So maybe now it's gonna be different now that I'm a bit more vocal. I'm using Twitter where yeah, I'm using that for almost activism. So now it's probably different. And but the few times where people are curious and or want to confront me, like, why do you think this? Like in, for example, in Poland, where it's a very Catholic country, there was a couple of interviews that were very confrontative, and I'm fine with that. It's fun to discuss, but yeah, it's most of the time it's something that goes on the radar, and yeah, people are polite too. They see me as a shy, humble guy, and I don't think they want to rock my boat too much.
Right. Were you raised with any religious beliefs that you had to work to break through to get to this point of view?
Not at all. Not at all. My mom has always been non-religious, like even mentioning that she's an atheist. My dad is a bit more. Whenever the issue comes up, my grandfather, his dad was actually a Catholic teacher, like a school teacher, which it was almost very common in Argentina that teachers were Catholic priests. But so there wasn't any mention of gods or any like going to church on Sundays. But now, or when I started talking about these topics, he's been the voice for taking the other side. So trying to explain to me how I can try to figure out how religious people think, and he would
Hmm.
mention how he would go to retreats when he was young for fasting, for reading thick books, and contemplating existence. So yeah, I've learned a lot, and but yeah, my family is very non-religious, and so it was more about looking at the World Values Survey and seeing, okay, Sweden is up in the top as one like outlier country from the rest of the world, being very secular, being very liberal. And then you have other types of outliers. You have basically all the other countries being religious in different forms, but you have different flavors, and you have another outlier that's very interesting, and that's the U.S. being the very rich and very educated, but still very superstitious.
Tell me this when sitting on the sidelines of the pandemic, as all artists have been doing for the past year and a half, I'd imagine your perspective is especially unique having gotten as far in your degree as you did.
Yeah.
But did you during that time think I don't know, did you at all wonder about that alternate reality we had talked about? Kind of like, what if you had continued your degree? Would you be working on the vaccine?
Ah, yeah. I mean, I know that my professor was, as soon as the pandemic hit, he was crunching numbers and doing Facebook posts. And actually, one interesting thing he noticed was that for each country in Europe, if the size of the first peak was relative to the initial dose. So how many people were Sweden had people from Italy, from many different countries. At first, we thought it was only Italy, but it was from different countries, and we had a slightly higher dose than our neighboring countries, and that was one of the reasons why the peak was higher here. But yeah, so I don't know. I would probably do something, maybe not the vaccine, but I would probably help out in some way.
My friends and I play this game called Spot a Spot,
Okay.
where you try to guess what like top streaming songs are. Do you
Ah,
know off the top of your head what your top streaming song is?
the heartbeats, stay alive, crosses.
Yeah. I think it's interesting though, looking at that live album that came out last year. When you start playing crosses, or that was, gosh, 2 years ago now, right?
Mm.
So when you start playing crosses, the crowd recognizes it, and it's like I think you're one of those performers who does have a good read on what your audience's favorite songs are. How do you gauge that these are your most popular songs with your fans? Do you look at the numbers on Spotify, or is it just crowd reactions, or
Yeah, it's all of the above. Crowd reactions is like you get that in your face. Like if I try to play Heartbeats early in the set and then try to put a less popular song as the last song, those shows are pretty. Yeah, they're not successful. So yeah, I learned the hard way. Like try to please the crowd at least towards the end. But then, yeah, it's fun to see the figures. My labels know that I like numbers, so they send me the figures once in a while from Spotify, from iTunes, and also from different countries. Like this is being played on this radio station. So now El Invento was played a lot on one of the biggest French radio stations. That was a bit of a surprise.
we were talking briefly about, singing in Spanish, and with a name like Jose Gonzalez, I'd imagine a lot of people would think, "Oh, this guy must be Spanish,"
Hmm.
with so I wonder if have you seen any like Spanish radio picking up this song yet?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. They invited me pretty early. I've been there twice already, playing El Invento, and yeah, they've been very supportive. So yeah, that was fun to finally sing in Spanish.
Yeah, the cover songs you've chosen and that have become associated with you over the years have been such a disparate array of acts, and like you take a song like Heartbeats,
Yeah.
and it's so different from the original. How do you choose your covers?
Yeah, I can mention how I chose the ones on this album. I mean, the only strict cover is one by the artist Lale. She's also an artist from the same suburb as me in Angered. And for this time, it was about me trying to find a song that was felt personal and that was talked about these difficult issues, the issue of death. And she wrote this beautiful song for when her mom passed away, and it's a very uplifting and, in my mind, a very humanistic view on death. So a moment on Earth and how to sort of celebrate it. So that felt like a perfect pick for this album, where I was struggling to find depth in the collection of songs that I had. That there are some are a bit too distant or too jokey. So yeah, En stund på jorden, and then also choosing the Junip song "Line of Fire," which is one of my favorite Junip songs, and it's a type of writing that where I'm more personal. And then the DJ Kotze collaboration, which is the last song, "Honey Honey," which also shows another side of me where I wrote the lyrics pretty quickly, and I was thinking about my girlfriend, and shows a sensual side that's been lacking in my music.
Tell me about the thought process of like including something like that on an album. I mean, it's always been in you to come up with a song like that, but it's not necessarily like what they'd say on brand for Jose Gonzalez. But what finally made you be able to say, you know what, this belongs on my album?
Yeah, I think just once I started varying the album, then all of a sudden everything was possible, and also I felt like if I have celebration of life, if I have a song about death, I also need sensuality or sex. I need dance. I need silliness. I need seriousness. Yes, as soon as I opened the doors, I sort of needed to fill out as many slots as possible to make it complete.
With an album with such a range, what are the shows going to be like?
Well, the first shows I'm doing now with Rufus Wainwright, I'm going to be playing on my own, just guitar and vocals. And I've decided not to add the loop songs like swing or the others. So I'm going to keep it more in the style that I'm people are used to, classic, just singer songwriter. plus the songs that are I usually call riff songs, the songs that are more Mali oriented. But yeah, maybe after next year I'll be probably adding loops and drum machines, and it's still gonna be me on my own on stage, but more danceable.
Yeah, it seems like with this album, you're in a much more comfortable place than you were at the time of that documentary. Like you're more comfortable in your profession, in your artistic expression and collaboration. I mean, I could just be projecting, so tell me
No,
if
no,
I'm
yeah,
wrong.
no, it's true, and I mean, I learned many tricks for writing songs, but I also learned many tricks for living.
Yes, Jose Gonzalez with some tricks for living. Be sure to listen to his latest album, Local Valley, and check out his touring schedule, especially for our friends in the UK, Germany, France, and other parts of Western Europe. Speaking of which, did you know that you can study music with Berklee Online from anywhere in the world? And if Jose Gonzalez has tricks for living, we have treats for listening to this podcast. That's right, because you listen to the Music Is My Life podcast, you can save $100 off your first Berklee Online course. All you got to do, go to musicismylifepod.com and you'll find all the necessary info there. Hey, and you know what would be a treat for me? If you could go to iTunes and fill out a review for this podcast. And, review it positively. Don't play a trick. This episode was edited by Talia Smith, mastered by Jose David Vindesmora. All visual assets coordinated by Mike DeBenedictis. Social media by Brooke Larson. Web assistance courtesy of Mark Thomas, Steve Zimmerman, and Joe McDonough. Thanks to our video team who posts these episodes on YouTube 2 weeks after they premiere on podcast services. Speaking of YouTube, subscribe to the Berklee Online YouTube channel and you'll be the first to know about our upcoming interview video series, 4-4. The first episode premieres soon with guest Lou Barlow. All right, back to the credits. I wrote and recorded the original Music Is My Life theme song, but the expert remixing comes courtesy of Lily Dickinson. Special thanks to Gabriel Reifer Cohen, Greg Fauscher, the inimitable Ken Weinstein, and you. Stay inspired, listeners. Happy Halloween. Talk soon.